Welcome to The Smart Divorce on Divorce Source Radio, helping you move forward with focus, hope, and confidence, saving you time, money, and your sanity as you build a better life post-divorce. I'm Steve Peck. Deborah Moskovich, divorce consultant, educator, and author of The Smart Divorce, brings you the leading experts and researchers in the divorce arena. We'll also be speaking with those in the trenches, people who've learned from their divorce and how their experience has changed their lives. And they would tell you for the better. Deborah's learned that divorce can be a beginning, even if it looks like an end. Divorce can be rich in opportunity to learn and grow from. And we're going to explore how to take this information and create a positive post-divorce life. And now, here's Deborah.
Hi, Steve. How are you today?
I'm great, Debbie. How are you?
I'm fabulous. And today we're going to talk about a subject that I know you're going to like because it has nothing to do with finances. It has to do with dads. And you know what? Sometimes I think that dads get short shrift in society today in terms of being a single dad. Yeah. You know, you hear about Disney dads. I don't think you hear about Disney moms. You hear born-again dads, dads that disappear from their children's lives. And then we've got our guest, Joel Schwartzberg. He's an award-winning humorist, personal essayist, and screenwriter whose works appeared in Newsweek, the New York Times, New Jersey Monthly. I mean, he's written all over the place. But I saw a collection of essays that he wrote called The 40-Year-Old Version. And it's like, Joel, it's so clever. Yeah. But what I really liked is what he shares in terms of his humors of a divorced dad and what his experience is.
Anytime you can bring humor into divorce, that's a good thing, right?
Absolutely.
Hey, Joel, how are you?
Hi, sorry. I couldn't help but break into that. I think humor is applied to anything that's stressful. It helps relieve the stress, and it helps you figure out what's really truthful about your emotional reactions.
Where does this humor come from?
Well, I think, humor is a way of expressing a stressful moment and sort of dealing with it. So when I am trying to, for example, explain divorce to my kids and what it means to them and trying to impress upon them the fact that there are just more people in their lives to love them, and now they have two homes versus one, they respond to it if I put it in a light context. And when I write about it in my book, I write about some of the interactions with my kids and other people that strike me as funny. And that's a way of relating to people about it. Divorce is a very serious thing, and it's often treated in a very, very serious way. And I needed something. One of the reasons I wrote the book is because I needed something that treated it in a more relatable way and talked about some of the idiosyncratic things that happen.
Can you share one of those funny stories with us?
Sure. I'll talk about some of the things that I do with my kids that are sort of unique and fun. One of the things we do is I make sure that my kids are living with me versus just visiting me, and that I'm living with them and not just entertaining with them. So one of the things we like to do is go to a discount store like Walmart or Kmart or Target or something like that, and we buy those fizzy drinks, those carbonated water beverages that are flavored. And the first thing we do when we leave the store is we shake it up, and then we open it up. And, the delight I see in their eyes, and my kids are 12, 9, and 9, I have twin girls and a son, is just, amazing. And it always reminds me, we laugh together, and it reminds me of the bond I have with them. And by the way, it's very cheap, it's very easy, it's very accessible, and it's a quick, fun thing, and it just brings a lot of joy to us. And as I communicate with my kids and I become more of a genuine, authentic father, honestly, as the result of my divorce, we have a lot of fun together, and we learn about, the difference between Demi Lovato and Miley Cyrus and this movie versus that movie and those kind of things. I have a very strong bond with my kids now, and it's based on a real, genuine relationship.
Cool.
But isn't that what parenting is all about? I mean, whether or not you were married, or now that you're divorced, and you are remarried, and I want to get into that because I think you wrote a brilliant article about stepmothers and that they shouldn't be called stepmothers. I love that.
Right, that's right. one of the things that happened during my first marriage was that I was parenting on the basis of someone else's standards and expectations. The thing I was asking myself without realizing it is, what would my wife do in this situation? What would my wife want me to do in this situation? What would my parents have done in this situation? What would Dr. Phil do in this situation? And I never, I never asked myself, well, what would I do? What's genuine to me? I have this idea in my head of a celebrity dad who goes on the Tonight Show and talks about how perfect it is that he's a father and everything's a moment of glory and beauty and there's no stress. And, these are the standards I was basing my fatherhood on. Once I got a divorce, all that went away. I looked at my kids in the eye and I had to decide what we're doing now. What are the disciplinary rules? What are the ways and the standards by which we're going to make this work for us? And in so doing and making that up for myself, I'm able to have, for the first time, a more genuine relationship with them. I have to decide, when my child shouldn't interrupt me on the phone, what kind of manners we should have when we go to the diner. And dealing with those honestly has made me a better father, to be frank about it.
That's fabulous. But, in all honesty, there's no training for a parent, right? So it's learning on the job.
Right. And I encourage, these kind of, I've written articles, and one of them is sort of like 10 things divorced dads need to know, and other articles like that. But they apply to any father, really, because what I've found in the circles I've traveled is that a lot of fathers step back and they relegate themselves to a role of, well, I need to keep this child alive, I need to keep him fed, I need to keep this child clothed, and everything else goes to mom. And not only are the kids missing out in that kind of relationship, but the father is absolutely missing out, and that's something that's often left out of the equation.
Yeah, and I love those 10 tips. Let's go over them, because I think for our listeners, they're so valuable. Number one, you talk about you divorced your ex, not your kids.
Right. One of the big ones is to recognize that your kids have two homes now versus before they have one. So they're not visiting you, you're not their babysitter, you're not their entertainer, but they come to live with you, and that means you should be doing living things with them and enjoy them. You should go on errands. You should do things you need to do. You should do that to-do list. You don't have to be the Disneyland dad, as you said before. And I think that's very important, and kids need to know, I got remarried, and instead of being a place of instability for them, I wanted them to know that now there are more people in their lives who love them. And so there are positives in all of that. And those are the things I want divorced dads to know, because it's easy, like you said, to fall into this trap of, I've divorced my kids as well as my wife. But really, it's a time to step up and to be the authentic dad you mean to be. And one of those tips is you're going to make mistakes, and that's okay, and make those mistakes and learn from them and be honest about them and honest with yourself, because that's what parents do too. They make mistakes. If you're not making mistakes as a parent, then I doubt that you're an actual parent.
Yeah. And it doesn't matter whether or not you're married or divorced. Everybody makes mistakes. You got to step up to the plate and admit you've made those mistakes. The second point that you said,
and find out who you are, not who your wife expects you to be, but who you really are as an individual, and be that dad for your kids.
I think that's true. As adults, we're always trying to please. Can you imagine? So as an adult, we're trying to please everybody else, and you want to please your partner for being a good parent, and you want to please your friends in terms of having them look at you as a role model. But you know what? At the end of the day, it's your kids that have to live with whatever it is that you're acting out. The second point is the only parenting expectations worth a damn are your own.
Right. Right. I mean, it comes back to that issue of expectations, what you expect, and this is the trap that dads find themselves in. I mean, when you see dads on TV, what do you see? You see people who would rather play golf than just about anything, including parenting. You see people that are like Everybody Loves Raymond, or very inept, but for the saving grace of their super intelligent wives, super wise wives, and we're kind of lazy dummies. And so this message is pervasive. We get it from television, we get it from our parents, we get it from the media, and we begin to think that we're ineffectual parents, that we're lesser parents. And nothing could be farther from the truth. But we do have to take that opportunity to even talk to our kids. When my kids, my kids have been listening to kids' music for a long time. This is like Rafi and Laurie Berkner and Dan Zanes. I hated that music. It's one of the things I write about often. And then one day I said to them, we're going to just listen to my iPod, and we're going to listen to what I liked in high school. So next thing you know, we're listening to The Cars and REO Speedwagon and Journey and what have you. And what do you know? They loved it. They were all ready to move into grown-up music. But it took me deciding that it's something, I wanted to do. And that's key also as a parent. What I've learned is that you shouldn't do something that makes you unhappy because you think it makes them happy. I don't bring my kids to Chuck E. Cheese anymore not because they don't necessarily like it, but because I don't like it.
Yeah.
And kids know when you're not enjoying something. So the key is to find things that you enjoy together. Don't feel like you're a slave to whatever they want to do at the moment. There's nothing better than when you're enjoying something together, like we were watching that exploding water. We love that, and it doesn't get better than that. No matter what I do, how much money I spend, it doesn't get better than that one moment when we're watching that thing of water explode in front of us.
And, sometimes the cheapest things are the best things. You give your kid I remember when my kids were little, and I would give them this great present, and they loved the box.
Right, they love the box. My kids love sorting my socks, my black socks and my brown socks. I just dump it over their heads like leaves in the fall, and I have them go at it. And they, there are three of them, and they love matching up the different styles and looking at the textures and see what goes with what. They also sort my multivitamins because they like the little shapes and the this that versus the fish pill and what have you. And I have one of those little plastic things where it's like every day has a new set of vitamins. So they organize that. They like, unloading the dishwasher.
Man, you got it made.
Yeah,
I know.
Really.
Right, if they could only do my taxes, I would have it, a perfect situation.
You know what,
Someday.
though, Joel, it sounds like you're the kind of guy that really has always liked kids and gotten along with them. But, there's a lot of men out there that have a hard time communicating with kids. You've seen it before. We see it when we go to restaurants. We'll see the father and his kids sitting at lunch, and they don't speak a word. And I've talked to some of these men, and they kind of say, look, they're a kid. I don't have anything to talk to them about. What do you say to those guys?
I feel like I'm at a bit of an advantage. Like, I can get into all that pop culture stuff. I work for Nickelodeon. I watch a lot of television. I go to a lot of movies. But for dads who are not like that, the one thing I would recommend is remember when you were a kid and talk about those experiences. What movies did you see as a kid? What kind of ice cream did you like? What kind of experience has made you happy when you were a kid? On your birthday, going to an amusement park. And that's an avenue through which you can reconnect to your own kids, because some of those things are timeless. It may take some effort to find those things you can do together. But like I said, everyone has socks. A lot of people have multivitamins. Everyone has to go shopping. When we go to Kmart, the kids love hanging on the cart, and we go in and out, and we have scavenger hunts where I ask them to look for things. Don't think of, I need to spend $100 and go to medieval times and that kind of thing. Very expensive. But rather, how can I turn my normal errands and my normal day, how can I make them a part of it, and how can it be an interactive thing? And unless that kind of dad is a very shut-down communicator in general, I think there's always something. But if you go in thinking this is going to be a hardship, I'm going to have to put up with something really, really boring that I hate when I'm with my kids, then you're setting yourself up to fail. But if you go into looking at it like, how can I make part of this fun? My kids and I love going into a dollar store. I give each of them $1. It costs me like nothing. And I don't know if you've been to a dollar store recently, but there's tons of stuff there for $1 that kids love to get and do. And we go in and out, and they choose things, and we make negotiations, and these are the things. It's about how you go into it, what your expectations are. You're looking to have fun. You're looking to make these genuine connections.
Yeah, you got to think outside the box. I remember taking my kids to the dollar store, and I say, hey, kids, knock yourself out. You can buy 5 things. Knock yourself out. What a hero.
Big spender.
Yeah. But, I have to tell you that when I first started dating, so this is going back 15 years ago, and I would meet, men with kids, different ages, and, I guess that was my perceptions of what fathers were like. Mm-hmm. Based on, and my father was a very involved father, but, I thought to myself, oh my God, I can't believe that this guy is so involved with his kids. I can't believe he's got such a close relationship with his kids. Like, I was just so in awe that I thought, oh, men are capable of this? And it's kind of like these social perceptions, exactly what you talked about in terms of the media. You look at Modern Family and Al Bundy and some of these shows, and really it's these bumbling dads. And so that's what you kind of think. But when I actually saw that there were so many men involved in their kids' lives, like that drew me to a guy. Like I thought, wow, that's sexy.
Absolutely, and well, that sounds good. And one thing I would recommend is, as you do these things, this is to fathers, you have to do it outside and separate from your wife or whoever you're with. It doesn't help to be with your wife and try to be a good dad. I mean, you can be a good dad, but if you really want to go there, you need to take those kids out by yourself. Nothing made me prouder than when I would bring 2 car seats and my son by the hand to a diner and have the owner of the diner come out to me and just shake my hand. I felt so proud that I was able to do that by myself. And it's just, it's sort of a replication of what happened to me after I was divorced. You need to be out there making your own decisions, doing your own things. I like to take the kids out to fast food sometimes. I'll let them get sugary cereal sometimes. And it just feels really good that I made this decision that makes them happy. We can enjoy it together. And so whether you're married or not, I really recommend fathers to take that time and to spend the time with their kids.
Right.
This other idea...
Sorry, go ahead.
I was just going to say, like, for divorced dads, one thing that makes them think they've divorced their kids is, well, now I've gone from spending, every day with my kids to 1 day a week or 2 days a week or one overnight. What I say to them is, think about the kids whose parents are soldiers, who they don't see for sometimes years on end, or kids whose parents are lawyers, who come home so late and leave so early that they only see them on the weekends. You would never say that those people are not fathers. So why would you think that you can define a father by the amount of hours in a day that he spends with his kids? So, take that notion out of your head completely. It's not about how much time you spend. It's about the quality of that time and how genuine it is.
I think that's an excellent point, because not only that, I look at my kids now who are 16, 18, and 22, and I'll just use my 16-year-old as an example. We're not sitting at, in the family room watching TV and hanging out all day and, he's in his room doing his homework. He's with his buddies on Skype and text messaging and everything else. It's not like we're hanging out all day. He's doing his thing and I'm doing mine. And I think there's that misperception that the parent that's home with the kids all day has all these fun times and doing all this stuff with the kids, but not really. You're doing your thing and they're doing theirs.
Yeah, but
and in fact, I build that into the time I have with my kids. I ask that their mother, I ask her to give them the homework so they could do homework in the living room while I'm playing music for them or doing something else. And I don't have a problem with carving out some of my time with them for them to do independent stuff, drawing or researching or on the computer, because I know that the idea of us being together as a family is being instilled in them, whether or not I'm constantly in their faces.
Right. I think the homework thing is so important. Like, you're supporting their educational goals.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. And I have independent relationships with their teachers as well, separate from their mothers. And I think that's really important also. Their mother is not the person who stands between their teachers and me. She's not the messenger. I need to have a direct relationship with their teachers because I'm their father. I'm going to have ideas that are different from what their mother has, and I need to make my voice known and know what's going on directly from the teachers.
Well, Joel, I'm assuming you've had an amicable relationship through your divorce anyway with your ex, but there's a situation too where a lot of men that get divorced and then their ex will remarry, and then their new husband and their son, in this case, they get this bond, and the new husband is working with the kid with baseball, and then when the kid comes to his real dad, dad tries to help him with that, and the kid says, "No, Dad, it's like my new dad told me." And that just drives a stake through dads' hearts, and for some, it drives them away.
Right. I mean, I'll be clear with you and honest. My kid's mother remarried, as I did, and that guy spends way more time with my kids, fathering them, parenting them, than I do. And sometimes I'm asked if I'm threatened by that, or sometimes I bring it up in discussion with other people. And it's one of those 10 things that was mentioned earlier, that your biological dad is your dad forever. Like, nothing will take that away. No amount of time, no amount of exposure to something else. There are children we know who've been abused by their father, and they spend their whole life still looking for love from the father that abused them, let alone was just away for a time or didn't have as much exposure. There's a bond I have with my kids that fella, that man, will never have with my kids, no matter how much time he spends with them. They talk about how they wrestle with him and how he takes them here and there, but I know in my heart when I look at them that we have a father-children relationship that guy will never have, and nothing against him, but I'm very secure in that. And it's not about the amount of time we spend. It's about the fact that they look at me, they know they have one dad in the whole world, and that's going to be me, and nothing will change that.
I think that's fabulous. I think it's all in the reframe in terms of, the way you perceive it. You've got, you're very confident, and that's what's important. I think, Steve, when you're talking about all these other dads, you've got to have that confidence in yourself that you're doing everything you can to have a great relationship.
Well, those are the dads I'm worried about, because no one wants to lose their son or daughter. And that's exactly what happens sometimes. And I'm just trying to figure out a way. And I think Joel just said it. And I think that a lot of men will really get that you are always their dad. Even if you feel like this other guy is taking the limelight, you're still the man.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. But
right, that's your birthright.
Yeah. I remember for myself. Well, I remember for myself when my former husband got married, and now all of a sudden there's this other woman in my kid's life, and she was doing stuff with them, and my kids were introduced to different things, and I started to feel a bit of a sense of insecurity. But, then you have to step back and say, hey, wait a minute, just exactly like you did, Joel. Like, I'm their mom, I'm the biological mom, and, I'm actually happy if my kids can have a good relationship with all adults in their life,
Mm-hmm. And it's like I told them when I got remarried, and even when their mother got remarried. Like, you now have more people in your life to love and take care of you, and I approve of them. But I definitely sympathize with you in particular. I mean, when there's a new mother in their lives, it's someone you never got to vet. You vetted babysitters more than you got to vet the other parent in their lives. And so that's a frustrating situation. And when I sometimes speak in front of stepmother groups, I hear that a lot. And one of the things I often talk a lot is when fathers get remarried, to remember what they owe their new wives and not to let that suffer as a result of all this baggage they bring into it.
There's a role, I think, though, that as a step parent, and we're going to talk about that in a second, as a step parent, you have to know your place, too, with your partner's children, right? Because you're not the one that's going to be disciplining them. You have to have a bit of a different kind of relationship with them. You can't take over. You have to remember that you're not the biological parent.
That's true. But something to keep in mind is, and my wife made this clear to me, and it's a good point, that home is still shared by, the father and the stepmother. And the rules of that home, when the kids are in that home, can be set and should be set by both parents. So while the step-parent is not the parent of those kids, the step-parent does set the rules of that home the minute those kids step inside, whether it's etiquette or, cleaning off your dishes or hanging up your coats or where you put your shoes, anything like that. And that's all valid stuff. So I think there's, that needs to be understood. The stepmother still has control of what happens in her home.
As does the stepfather.
As does the stepfather, as does the father, whoever the owners of that home. And one of the things I say that's sometimes very controversial is that I feel comfortable having different rules in my home than their mother has in her home. There's a lot said about, that all the rules should be consistent so that they never have any confusion about, this standard or that standard, so that, the idea is that my rules of etiquette and responsibility should be the same. And I don't necessarily believe that. My theory is that if kids have a different set of expectations between home and school, and between their home and the home of one of their friends, then they can understand and deal with a different set of expectations between their mother's home and their father's home. I don't feel a need to have to make them absolutely consistent. I can have different rules in my home.
I agree. I hear that from a lot of people in my divorce consulting practice and just from my friends and colleagues, how they will talk about the rules that are different in, their former partner's home, in their co-parent's home. And, like you can't control what goes on in someone else's house.
Right.
You just can't. Like I have, my own rules, and I know that their dad has his rules. And, as long as your kids aren't in harm's way, there's nothing you can do about it. Just like you talked about when you were married to your wife, you had different parenting styles. Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. You might have tried to accommodate her parenting styles, but you had your own ways that you want to do things.
Right. And I made the mistake, I think I can remember times I would drop the kids off at their mom's house, and as they were walking to the house and they threw their coats down, I'd be like, guys, you need to hang your coats up. And that was an overstep. I don't do that anymore. As much as it pains me to see them throwing their coats in the lobby of this house, there is a line. And, once they step into my SUV, then I control that situation. But once they cross that line into that house, they can have those rules. And I'd be overstepping if I suggested otherwise.
Although I still think the kids need to hang up their coats.
Yeah, right. I mean, we can all think that. Yeah, that makes sense. But whatever happens,
Yeah, I get so angry. Sometimes I just take their coats and put them in the laundry room because
don't sweat the small stuff.
Right, don't sweat the small stuff. And it's hard to. It's the kids will become ingrained by rules and expectations of the house they spend the most time in. Like I often say, if I try to change their attitudes about something or some way I would do differently, it's like taking an ice cube out of the tray and putting it on the table for a while. Sure, it'll melt and it'll change, but eventually it goes back into the tray, back into the freezer, and it just hardens up again. So those are some of the complex things as a divorced dad that I have to deal with. If I sense that they're being routed in a certain way I disagree with. But I try to make, like about their grades, for example. I'm a little, I pay a little more attention to their grades than their mother does. And so I just sat them down and I said, what, here are my expectations. B's and A's and this kind of thing, that's good to me. If you're failing or you're getting a 0, that's unacceptable, and that means there's something wrong. And that's what my expectation is of you. And your mother may have different expectations, but that's what I expect of you. And that's sort of how I came to a place of just sharing what my point of view is, so I wouldn't be so frustrated by their having a different, set of standards.
How does a kid reconcile that? His mom has one set of standards and his dad another.
Right. Well, it happens, I think, in all families. I don't think that's something that's exclusive to divorce. And I don't try to imply one is stronger than the other. Mom and dad are always going to be different. And if it's a shared parental responsibility, then there are going to be different things. We know all those stories. If mom says no, go ask dad. Maybe dad will get away. You can get away with something when you're going out with dad than you will with mom. So I don't think that's necessarily new to kids. But I take the point of view of, my kids are pretty smart. They're very verbal. They do a lot of reading. They get stuff, and we talk honestly all the time. So instead of trying to change them in a way that's contrary to their training at home, the most I try to do is say, this is what I expect of you. And I come to these expectations based on the way I was parented when I was a kid, and this is why this is important. I'm not just saying it, but these grades will matter in the future. You're learning how to learn so that you can become better learners in the future. You're learning how to take tests so that, when it is hard for you instead of easy, that you'll know how to study, things like that. And they seem to be okay with it. And I really invite and I encourage them to talk to me about confusions. Kids won't always do that, but I try to be very open to them and try to be very encouraging about them telling me what's going on. And if there's a conflict, I hope they would bring it to me. They might not always, but at least they know that I want to hear that kind of stuff.
You're very lucky. You've got a very special relationship with your kids.
They're very lucky, too. I mean, he sounds like an awesome dad.
I like to think so. I like to think so. But it's it's a simple thing, and I don't think it's a virtue of some exclusive talent I have or insight. When I first got divorced, I thought that I was going downhill. I went to Google, and everything I saw back on Google said that I would be a failure. I would never find love in my life. My kids would go into therapy. I'd be broke in a year. And, none of those things really happened. And
except you did move into your parents.
I did, and that became I wrote an essay about that. I got it in the New York Times Magazine, and that was, I learned more about myself and my parents in that adventure than I did about my kids. But wherever my kids lived, I mean, I had to share my bedroom with my girls at one point, and my son was sleeping out in the living room. I didn't have a separate room for them. And amazingly, they adjusted. In the morning, we'd all get up together. We'd watch Saturday morning cartoons and eat cereal, what have you. Those kids are really resilient, and I think kids are resilient. The one thing they want from you is to be with you. At the end of the day, that's what they want from you. Even more so than your constant attention. They want to be with you. They want to live with you. And if you keep that in mind, no matter who you are, as the standard, not of always keeping them laughing 24/7, then you'll get by, and then you'll be doing the right thing, and then you'll be a good dad. That's the bottom line, and everyone can do that.
I can't wait to read more of your work when your kids get into their late teens and 20s, because I have a 22-year-old, and I'm telling you, I was so tight with him, and we're still tight. It just changes a lot. You know what I'm saying?
That dynamic is totally going to change. Sometimes I say it's going from never knowing. It's like you have your kids are too much in you, always having them in your face, and then later it's never knowing where they are.
Exactly.
Right.
So I imagine there may be a brand new book, and I'll have to revisit all my rules all over again for the teenage years, but that's part of life too.
It's good for business.
Yeah. I love your article that you wrote about the case against stepmother. Mm-hmm. And what you said was the message is, does the word stepmother convey more clearly that you're not a mother? And I thought that was brilliant because, at the end of the day, they are in the home, their father's partner, and they have to have that same respect. A stepmother's not a step below anything. And I thought that what you had to say was really, really introspective.
Yeah, and that idea actually came from my wife, who really, really rejects that term. And she doesn't even like playing part in some very good and strong step-mothering communities because of this idea that, who wants to be a step citizen or a step doctor or a step professional? It doesn't make any sense that we've assigned a label that already sets up a relationship, a ranking between the mother and the stepmother, and declares a winner at the same time. This is the mother, this is the stepmother. Why do stepmothers have to be reminded or told that you're almost a mother, but you're not? Remember that. Everyone's a unique individual, and my wife Anne would always rather be known as Anne, the teacher and the painter who loves them and who's their dad's wife, than any term that already sets up definitions and rankings and expectations.
And I love that because I absolutely hate labels. And the one that I despise is broken home.
Absolutely.
Let's go back to that list. Let's just quickly run through that list. We got to points 1 and 2. And this one is there's no such thing as a part-time dad, which obviously you are so involved. And Steve, I know you're a great father too. Like you guys are very involved in your children's lives. I think it's critical. So doesn't matter how much time you're spending, right?
It's true. And in fact, the subheading for my book was going to be the 40-year-old version, The Adventures of a Part-Time Dad in a Full-Time Life. And then as I was moving along, I said, that's not right. Like I said, is a dad who's off at war fighting a part-time dad? Is a dad who, by nature of a job, doesn't get to spend that much time with the kids? Is that a part-time dad? My mother didn't see her father for 2 years. He was fighting World War II. That was a common thing. Is that a part-time dad? If the answer is no to any of those questions, then it would also be no of a divorced dad, because the only thing that the major thing that's changed is the amount of time that's being spent with the kids, at least in my view. So, I really want to remind divorced dads that they're not a part-time dad; they're a full-time dad, because there are lots of things they could be doing without their kids: checking up on their grades, doing research, deciding what to do that weekend. If you're a dad, you're a dad, period. Now, you can lose that distinction by, being abusive or being neglectful or being a so-called deadbeat dad. But if you're doing what's responsible and you're being responsible and you're thinking about how you live with your kids, then you're a dad. There's no such thing as a part-time dad.
Right. And you're a dad, and not like in point 4, you said, and you're not a babysitter.
Right. You're not a babysitter. You're not an entertainer. Your kids are not visiting you, and you are not visiting your kids. They are living with you, and you are living with them.
Yeah.
And if you think about what that means, then you're doing the right thing. Then it'll become clear to you what you should be doing. Not constantly taking them to the movies. Once in a while, that there's nothing wrong with taking them to the movies, but do errands together, live together, eat together, and go to the places you want to go.
And then your point 6 is you have an inner dad.
Right.
There's an inner dad inside you.
Right. I think everyone has an inner dad, and that's the dad that's separated from the expectations of dadhood. Like that idea, and I mentioned it briefly before, but, before you're a dad, you see all these dads show up on talk shows or what have you, or on television, fictionalized dads, and they're talking about the greatest experience they ever had, and every moment is a moment of joy, and it's so easy because you're in love the whole time, and it sets you up for a false expectation. I write in the book about, how I expected to be leaving the hospital with this bouncing beautiful baby in my lap, and it would always be that way, and it wouldn't be that hard, and nothing was further from the truth. And I honestly write about a lot of depression I had when my son was firstborn, when my firstborn son came, and I realized I had to trade in a huge chunk of my life for that, to be a dad to that child, and these are the realities of the situation, and you have to come to grip with them. But the flip side of that is, being a genuine dad and deciding what you want to do and what standards you want to have and what things you enjoy that coincide with the things your kids enjoy. A lot of dads like sports, and it's trite and it's a cliche, but bringing your son to a baseball game and enjoying that together is one of the best things you can do because you're enjoying that together, and that's really key.
Right. And when you talk about the media, I think it's important for people to realize that celebrities, when they're interviewed, they talk in sound bites. Like, what sounds good? Just because they say something doesn't necessarily mean that they're walking that talk.
Right, exactly.
So the other point is, most kids can cope, and you talk about resiliency, and I think that that's great in terms of joint custody, but it isn't always easy.
Right, and there are some, definite do's and don'ts, and these are the sort of things you've heard before. I like to focus on things you haven't heard, but, don't argue in front of your kids. Don't use your kids as pawns in that divorce. Those things are just, like in the Bible of don't do. You don't want your kids exposed to any of the acrimony that existed that caused the divorce. Why you got divorced is not even their business so much. They may ask it, but you don't need to introduce those ideas to them. The kids are exposed to divorce in a lot of ways, and a lot of their friends are divorced. Something I often write about, in fact, is how divorce is often the villain in a lot of kids' movies. Even in The Incredibles, you find lines like, we need to do this to save mom and dad's marriage. And that sets up, that presents a very poor message for kids of divorce, because it says to them, your life is messed up in some way. Your family was broken. These kids managed to save their parents' marriage, and save the day. Tough luck for you. So I'm looking for ways to make it clear to my kids and to other divorced families that it's not the end of the world. It's not a death sentence, and that many kids are resilient. The studies that are done and the myths that we have of kids who are very, very psychologically wounded as a result of divorce, from the research I've done, it suggested that there were bad things happening in that relationship from the get-go, that the divorce is not necessarily what caused that damage, but what happened before and how those parents dealt with the divorce. If the parents are constantly yelling at each other in front of the kids, if there's a lot of legal proceedings, if the parents are using those kids as pawns, absolutely those kids will be scarred as a result of that experience, and they'll carry that with them. But if it's done with civility and there's always love expressed for those kids, and those kids understand that the divorce has nothing to do with them and none of that love has been diminished, reduced, or gone away, then, they grow up pretty fine and they're able to cope with that, especially in the modern day when it's so prevalent.
Yeah, I remember growing up, I don't think that I had any friends. I had one friend whose parents were divorced. And now, when I look at my kids and their friends and our extended network, there's certainly more than one individual in that group whose parents are divorced. Half that group is divorced, or maybe less than half, but 40%, 30%. So my kids are growing up knowing, other divorced kids, whereas, my friend whose parents were divorced didn't know other divorced kids.
Right. Mine was the first divorce in my family, so I actually had more difficulty with it in the context of my place within my own grown-up family than I necessarily did with the kids. And to be clear, the day after my divorce, I didn't suddenly have all these ideas and wonderful approaches to how I was going to help my kids understand. It took a long time, and like I said, one of the reasons I wrote the book was because I couldn't find any books with which I could relate. Most of the books for dads about divorce is legal advice and parenting advice, hardcore parenting advice. Do this, don't do this. I found very few examples of divorced fathers who wrote about their experiences, wrote about coming out of it okay, and sharing about them. And that's what I chose to write about, because that's the book I really could have used when I was going through it.
Yeah, I think that's fabulous. And that takes us to point 8 then. You can do what you like. Too many moms and dads feel martyrdom is a necessary part. And I actually agree with that. I'm not a martyr. I do things for myself because I believe happy mother, happy children, happy parent, happy children. And I think that is exactly what you're talking about there. Don't be a martyr.
Yeah, try to limit those sacrifices. And don't, I tell my kids will often be, they want to watch this movie. I'm like, no, I don't think so. How about this instead? Because this one seems more fun. Or we'll make decisions about food, and as a divorced dad, you may be like, wherever you kids want to go, I'll take you, and you can get 2 of these and 3 of these, and we'll get ice cream after, no matter what happens. And I don't do that with my kids. If they have an idea that I don't want to do or doesn't make sense, we don't do it. Sometimes we get dessert, sometimes we don't. Sometimes we get snacks, we eat something. And they, just like normal parent-child relationships, they're fine with that. They understand that, I make decisions, and I make decisions for them, and they're not always the decision the way they would like it to go, and that's okay. And also one of the things that, because this is not true in all situations, but their mother is not really into pop culture. Their mother doesn't like going shopping. Their mother doesn't like going to the malls. I happen to, and that may make me an anomalous American male, but I like shopping. I like all the pop culture.
Wow, I'm impressed.
So I even like returning things. It's really my parents that really instilled that love of returning things in me. So my kids get to do all this stuff with me that they never do at home. They never get to go to the mall. They only go to the mall with me. They never get to go to these, corporate restaurants. They only get to go with me. We never get to listen to their kind of music, but they do with me because I can tolerate that kind of stuff. So now I have experiences with them that they don't even get or even come close to in their life with their mother, and that's a great thing. And that's another suggestion for divorced dads. If you can find something that you can do with them that they never get to do at home with their mother or with their other parent, that becomes a brilliant thing, because then the child looks forward to that. Oh, my children tell me all the time, this is great. We never get to do this at home. We only get to do this with you, and I'll take that any day.
Hey, I just want to correct you because they don't get to do it at home, but you've got a home too.
Right. You're totally right. You're totally right. See, I'm even failing it sometimes. Keep the ideas and the symbols there, right? In this home and in that home.
Yeah.
That's the way I try to say it. And they have a home with me, and they're home with me, and they're home with their mom. That's the language I try to use, and usually I stick with it.
It's okay. And that's the thing. My kids used to refer to, oh, Mom, were we at your house today? And I'd say, it's not like my house, it's our house. And I would correct them over and over and over again. So now it's sort of ingrained, like, oh, it's our house. I hate when they refer to, like, your house. It's not my house, although they do have to abide by my rules, which they don't always like, but it's our house.
Yeah, absolutely. The more stuff they can have there that's of permanence is a good thing. I try to keep a lot of paper on hand. I let them use the computer. They have toothbrushes at my house. They have, they do overnights at my house, so they have all those necessary items. But I love to have stuff in my house that's just for them. I have books that's just their books, and so they can really feel like they have a home there, not that it's a transitional place for them.
We did a whole show on that, remember, Debbie?
Yeah, that's right. And it's so important. And that's something I talk about with my male clients in my divorce consulting practices. It is your kid's home. So, like, especially if you've got girls, think about the shampoos, the conditioners, the hair products that they want. Like, rather than packing them up and taking them here and there, right? Like, just have them at your house. Especially, you haven't experienced this yet, but when the girls get older, they get their period, like those kinds of things. Like
what's that?
when the girls get their period. Oh, yeah, what's that? Really, those are things that guys don't think about. Just like, when my son started to shave, it's like, that was totally foreign to me, right? So, those are things that you don't necessarily think about, but you need to think about them for your kids. So how do you make it more comfortable
and I
for
let
them?
It's not just the necessities. Like, I let them sort of own. I have a Wii system in my home, and I let them use it within reason and responsibly. But when it's the first thing they do, if I let them come into the house, is they set it all up. They set up the TV. They do it, and I think they feel a sense of ownership. I do have a game that I only play with them because only they would like it. But I like playing it with them, and so there are a lot of places in the home where they can feel that can help them feel like they live there, not just that they're coming by.
And, I think what else you've done is you've set up traditions, like new traditions and routines with them that they didn't have before. So, it gives them like a positive outlook, in terms of looking back and thinking, that's what we did with Dad. Like, I loved, whatever that was, playing the Wii game that they didn't get to do at their mom's house.
Right, exactly. And that goes to holiday traditions as well. Like, unfortunately, or however it worked out such that my kids are Jewish, but they don't really celebrate it or observe it that closely in their mom's house, and I celebrate it and observe it a little more closely at my house. So they're happy to do a Christmas type thing at their mom's house, and we do a Hanukkah type thing at my house, and we switch off on Thanksgivings, and we don't. These things don't have to bear any resemblance, the things that happen at my house and the things that happen at their house. We're able to build our own traditions. And I spoke about, one of my essays was about Thanksgiving, and I was having them the day after Thanksgiving. And you don't have to think of it like, oh, I don't get to spend Thanksgiving with my kids. You think of it like, well, this is the new tradition. They spend the day after Thanksgiving. We have turkey sandwiches, and we go to the ice show or whatever we do. And it's, you build new traditions across the board. And the more you do them, the more traditional they become. Yeah,
I love that. Let's look at point 9. Your issues with your ex don't belong in your kids' lives. That is so important. Like the corn and mashed potatoes on your first grader's plate. Your parenting should be separated from any conflicts you have with your ex. Very well said.
And and you're allowed to make mistakes there. Passions get high, and sometimes you will have, divorces are by definition not civil, not amicable, because at their heart there is an issue that divides people. So there are going to be times when it's going to get heated, and there are times when it's gotten heated between myself and my ex. But we really try to keep that separate from the kids, because in the early days when some of that bled over and my kids did have some of it, they wanted to rush over and try to fix it and try to make it better, and that was my son's inclination, and it really instructed me as to why it's damaging to him, because he should feel no role in the demolition or the destruction of that marriage, or in putting us back together, or in any of that. They just need to be kids, and they need to feel loved, and you need to really keep that out of their lives. It has nothing to do with them.
Yeah, I totally agree. And the last point, and I think we'll just end on this point, is you'll screw up, and that's okay.
Right. And to give yourself a break. And if you can think that divorce was all right, and you don't think of yourself as someone who made a mistake, and you'll be carrying that forever, and you have a scarlet D, as a result of divorce, then you should allow yourself to make mistakes across the board. That's just human nature. And yeah, sometimes I'll do something with my kids, and it turns out to be terrible. Sometimes I'll do something irresponsible. Sometimes I'll overshare with them. I'll overshare what I'm thinking, or overshare a concern I have about them, or something about a relationship, or anything really. Or I'll overshare about a moment I feel vulnerable, or I'll overshare about a moment I feel like I didn't parent them well enough. And that's okay too. But learn from those experiences, watch their reactions, and be genuine. And I think you'll always do the right thing. But being genuine means making mistakes, because we all do it. Parents, children, animals, professionals, amateurs, we all make mistakes, and we have to give ourselves room to do them.
Hey, Joel, I've linked your book on divorcesourceradio.com. So for any of our listeners that want to read the 40-year-old version, you can find it on our recommended reading tab. So go there, you can pick it up. It sounds like a great book. How else can our listeners find you?
The best place to go is bookfordad.com. bookfordad.com. And that's a site I created so that not only can you learn about the book, but you can see other interviews I've done. There's a sample chapter of the book, and there are a lot of reviews. And, I appreciate the strong critical reviews and the awards it's won, but mostly what I like is hearing from other dads who say that it meant something to them and it spoke to them in a way that they hadn't been spoken to before, or that it empowered them or soothed them in some way. And I put a lot of those on the site also. So that's at bookfordad.com.
Fabulous. Well, thank you so much for your time today. I know for me it's been inspiring. You are a wonderful dad.
I very much appreciate that, and I appreciate the chance to share and hear stories as well. So thank you so much.
I love that guy.
It was fabulous. You know what I liked is that he was so positive. Usually you hear from dads and from moms and how difficult divorce is and how bad it is and blah, blah, blah. But Joel's so creative and had such a positive spin on it.
Yeah, he sure did.
I'd love to be one of his kids. I want to shake up that fizzy pop and let it go all over the place, because a mom like me, I'm going to tell my kids, hey guys, just make sure you don't get it all over the place. Don't get it on your clothes. It's going to get sticky. But he's cool.
For sure. And, you just have to have fun with kids. And I just sensed that he was the kind of guy that really liked kids.
Absolutely. And so he's a fun dad, but he's not labeled a fun dad like a Disney dad. He enjoys being with his kids. And I think that is such an important message that we need to give parents, not just dads, but moms and dads, in terms of, it's got to be about them. It's not about you.
You bet.
And that's another great show on The Smart Divorce on Divorce Source Radio.
Thanks, Deborah. Look forward to speaking to you again next week. As always, I hope the program helped you. If you have a comment or question you'd like to ask us, we'd love to hear from you. You can leave us a voicemail on our listener line at area code 248-686-2256. Or drop us an email with your question or comment to divorcesourceradio@gmail.com. New programs are available every week on divorcesourceradio.com, as well as iTunes, BlackBerry, Stitcher, and all over the web. If you'd like to be notified when new programs are available, you can follow us on Twitter. Our follow word is Divorce Source. Also, if you're not listening from our website, I invite you to stop by divorcesourceradio.com, where you'll find a complete program archive. If you're looking for a specific subject, simply type it into our search engine, and chances are you'll find what you're looking for. We also have other resources available at our website as well. And while you're on our website, click on the Facebook icon and join the growing Divorce Source Radio Facebook community. Thanks for listening. Until next time, make it a great week and stay healthy. I'm Steve Peck.